Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn how to compute a cross-exchange rate. In the foreign exchange market, foreign currencies are typically quoted against the US dollar, and that's called dollar exchange rates. For example, in this table, we have, in the first column, we have dollar price of foreign currency. So this is also called direct quote or American terms. And in the second column, we have foreign currency price of US dollar. And this is called indirect quote or European terms as well. So obviously it would not be feasible to make a market for every possible pair of currencies, and that's why we work with dollar exchange rates. But often we need to know exchange rate between two currencies where neither one is US dollar, such as euro price of British pound or Chinese yuan price of Japanese yen. In that case, we can then use these dollar exchange rates to compute cross-exchange rate. Again, cross-exchange rate is exchange rate where neither one is a US dollar. So let's take an example. Let's take a look at an example and see how we can do that. Let's compute cross rate between Australian dollar and Chinese yuan, and let's compute cross rate between Singapore dollar and Russian ruble, and let's compute cross rate between British pound and Japanese yen. So again, as long as we have dollar exchange rates for these currencies, we can always compute cross exchange rate between them. Since for every pair of currencies, exchange rate is quoted in two different ways, that is in indirect term or indirect terms, we can compute cross rate in a couple of different ways. We can take an indirect exchange rate and multiply it by direct exchange rate, or we can take two direct exchange rates and divide one by the other, or we can take two indirect exchange rates and also divide one by the other. So you can compute cross rate essentially in three different ways, and ignoring transaction costs, you should essentially get the same answer regardless of which method you used. So now let's use these three cross exchange rates as examples. So let's compute exchange rates between, as we said, Russian ruble, Singapore dollar, Japanese yen and British pound, and Australian dollar and Chinese yuan. So we're starting with the Russian ruble price of Singapore dollar. Okay? So in order to compute this, first thing we can do is we can take spot rate between Russian ruble and US dollar. So specifically, we're looking at ruble price of US dollar, or it is an indirect quote, and then we can take that and multiply it by direct quote for Singapore dollar, that is a dollar price of US dollar price of Singapore dollar. So this is one thing we can do. Or we could use indirect quote for Russian ruble, and then we divide it by the indirect quote for Singapore dollar. So this is one way. Or a third option for us is we could use two direct quotes by taking direct quote for Singapore dollar and divided by the direct quote for Russian ruble. So we could use either of these methods. So let's say we want to do the first one. So we use the table that we just saw previously. So from that table, you will see that indirect quote for Russian ruble is 72.968 Russian ruble is equivalent to 1 US dollar. So we take that and we multiply it by direct quote for Singapore dollar, which says that 1 Singapore dollar is equivalent to 73 cents. And the dollar signs will cancel each other out, and we will see that cross rate between ruble and Singapore dollar is 53. Oops. Let me clean that up. 53.266 Russian rubles per Singapore dollar. So that is the cross exchange rate between Russian ruble and Singapore dollar. So next we're looking at Japanese yen price of British pound. So again, just like before, we have three possibilities, right? So what we could do is we could take spot rate that is quoted in indirect terms or in European terms for Japanese yen. So $1, how many Japanese yen are equivalent to 1 US dollar? And we multiply it by the direct quote for British pound, so dollar price of British pound. Or we could take two indirect quotes. So Japanese yen price of US dollar divided by British pound price of US dollar. Or we could take two direct quotes, if you recall. So we could take a dollar price of British pound and divided by dollar price of Japanese yen. So again, we can do any of these methods. So let's say we want to do the second method. So for that, what we will do is we will take Japanese yen price of US dollar, which is given to us, and we see it's 105.6 Japanese yen is equivalent to 1 US dollar. So we will take that and divide it by British pound price of US dollar, which is 0.7626 British pound per US dollar. And from here we will see that 1 British pound is worth 138.87 Japanese yen. So the third one we're going to do is the Australian price of Chinese yuan, or it's also called renminbi. Again, we can use three different methods, right? We can use Australian dollar price of US dollar, and then we can multiply it by Chinese yuan price of US dollar. Oh, sorry. Dollar price of Chinese yuan. So this is indirect quote multiplied by direct quote, or we could take two indirect quotes. So we could take the Australian dollar price of US dollar and divide it by the Chinese yuan price of US dollar. Or we could take two direct quotes by taking US dollar price of Chinese yuan and divided by the US dollar price of Australian dollar. So for this one, let's use this third approach that uses two different direct quotes or two different exchange rates in American terms. So if you take a look at the previous table, you will see that 1 Chinese yuan is equivalent to 0.1442 US dollar. So we're just going to write it in this way. And we're going to divide it by the direct quote for Australian dollar, which says US dollar 0.7192 per Australian dollar. So when we compute this, we see that 1 Chinese yuan is equivalent to 0.20 Australian dollar. So this is how we compute cross rates.